Hey, this is Jason. Welcome back to the backwoods, backyard. And as promised, we're going to talk about stocking the pond and my experience with it. I was told by a few fish stockeries and pondboss.com. Everybody kind of had a different opinion, but for my half-acre pond, basically what they told me was 500 bluegill, copper-nosed bluegill, 50 shell cracker, and 30 bass. And I got the F1 Florida Northern Strain hybrid bass, tiger bass, I think they call it. And so my pond was dug for probably, well, I guess it was a 2-year project digging it, but they always had some water in it from the start. When they first started it, one end of it always kept a little water in the clay area. And it brought in a lot of frogs. I guess being in the woods, there was already frogs here. There's bullfrogs and there's little toads, and so everything was using the pond from the get-go, even when it was just a little 5-foot pool of water. So for that 2-year process of digging the pond here and there, stopping, redoing stuff here and there, whatever, I guess I built up a population of frogs. So I guess it was the 3rd year that I ended up stocking, and it was in the spring, either the end of March or beginning of April. And this was actually last year, so I got 1 year of growth on my fish right now. So I stocked bluegill, the 500 bluegill, the 50 shell crackers, which they say to put in your pond because they eat snails and stuff, parasites that get into your fish. You ever seen the little yellow worms and stuff in your fish meat? That's what the shell crackers are good for, eating parasites. And they mostly stay at the bottom. I think they reproduce once a year. So it's not your forage fish, it's just an extra bonus. Kind of helps with the health of your pond. Your bluegill or your forage fish, that's your main food source for your bass. So I wanted to get a good population of those, get them up and healthy before I put the bass in. I put the bass in the fall. I think it was October is when I put them in. But when I put those, I started off with my bluegill and shell crackers, and I also got 1,000 minnows and put them all into the pond. And this was after my pond had got kind of stabilized with my water depth. I didn't have much leakage. It was actually right after I put all the salt flock gel into the pond that sealed it all up. So I still had like a layer of slime on the bottom. All that slime and gel sunk to the bottom and seeked the little crevices and stuff where water was sucking out through and clogged them up, and they worked. But you can walk along the banks and you can slip and bust your butt. I mean, it was slick. It was all over everything. And then I had some of it was when I started aerating and mixing water with mix or whatever. Some of it would float up. I had little clumps floating here and there, and it was kind of green like it had algae mixed with it, and I guess silt from in the muddy water and everything. So I put my 500 bluegill, my fish in, and every day after that I was scooping out dead fish. I started out, I think like the first day I scooped out like 25 or 30 fish. I was devastated. Next day another 20, this and that. So I kept track of every day. I'd take a picture of it, have a scoop pile of it from the net. I'd ride around on a little boat and scoop up that fish, put it on the ground, take a picture. I ended up losing like 250, and I called up the guy that I bought the fish from. And there was a fish truck that would come to the feed stores, is where I picked it up. It wasn't but a 15-minute ride from the house. And they asked, what your water's doing, have you tested for your pH, have you ever, all kind of stuff, They suggested me getting a county agent to come and test my waters to make sure that it was a fish problem and not a pond problem. So I called up the county agent office, and the lady said she was going to give my case to the guy I needed to talk to, and he'll call me back. Well, that went on for a couple of weeks, and never got a phone call, so I got aggravated. I ended up ordering off of Amazon a pond water test kit. It did pH and nitrates and phosphates. It tested for all that stuff. And everything always read good, even after rain, before rain. It would fluctuate a little bit, but I didn't see any problem with it where that I had a water problem. So I told the lady with the fish truck what was going on, and I couldn't get in touch with the county agent office. They wouldn't call me back, and that I did this test and everything's reading fine. So she said, well, we did have a bad year of pollen, and maybe our fish, we had some issues with fish suffering from pollen getting in their gills, all the little baby fish. She said, maybe you got a sick batch. So they refunded me the fish. They plus gave me a few extra. I mean, they were on top of it. They did good. I have no complaints with it. I don't know what happened. I still don't understand why I was losing those fish. So I put the next 250 more bluegill back in the pond, and everything worked. I stopped losing fish. The ones that were still in here survived, and it all worked out. So I was happy with that. And then it started getting around June, and we was getting, 90-degree weather. My water temperatures was, and I had an aerator running the whole time. I had it non-stop running. And this one that sits on the bottom, and the bubbles are coming up in the deep water, making a column of air coming up. So it's just circulating my water, just coming up and circulating. So I'm mixing my waters, constantly mixing. And I started having another fish kill. So I got on Pond Boss. I told him about my first fish kill and got my fish back. Everything was fine for a couple of months, and then I'm back to losing fish again. What's going on? And I didn't lose but maybe 20, 25, but I was worried. And through talking with the guys on Pond Boss, one guy had a similar situation, and we had almost identical problems. What he said, what a few other guys had said, when I'm overheating my water, I was thinking I was low in oxygen. And some people suggesting, yeah, you're low in oxygen. I'm like, I don't have a machinery test equipment to test for dissolved oxygen in my water. How do I know if I'm low in oxygen? They were saying once you get above 84 degrees, it's very hard for it to keep oxygen. So they had suggested that I just run it at night. That way you let the temperatures cool, you let your water surface temperature cool, and then you start circulating your water once everything's cool. So you're circulating cool water, you're oxygenating it with the aerator system. It shuts off by 8 in the morning before the sun really starts to heat up your water. And that way your surface water heat up from the sun that you can't do anything about. And I had to get all the trees away from my pond because I knew I had soil that wouldn't hold good. So once I got it sealed, I didn't want trees where I had roots and stuff running through and cracking my seal in my pond and having a spot for my water to drain out. I got trees on the back side of my dam system and around, but it's in the summertime, the sun is so in the south, it's almost straight up most of the day. It gets full sunlight most of the day in my pond, so it gets really hot. So giving it that time where I can have the surface will get heated during the day, and they still had a deep spot with cool water to go to a refuge that had oxygenated water that wasn't getting depleted from the heat. Instantly that it solved my problem quick. I was just something I never would have thought of. I thought I needed more oxygen. I need more pumps. I need more diffusers blowing. But something simple as temperature, just not mixing your water, giving them a refuge, a cool water to go down deep and get out of that heat and let everything cool down, and then they come back out and feed in the afternoons. So I started feeding my fish. I started buying some pelletized. The minute I got them, I was feeding them a little floating pellet. 32% protein is what I had. Say the higher protein, the better, but that's all I can find around here that was at a decent price. I think it's there's some kind of feed meal around here. It's like floating catfish food. I don't even know the name. When I was first buying it, just came in a brown bag. Didn't even have a name on it. But it was 32% protein floating catfish food for fingerlings. So it's, I guess, like an 1/8 inch or 3/16. It was real small. So my little bluegill that was like 2 to 3 inches long is how big they were when I stocked them. They were able to eat it. And it didn't take long. They got on the program, and it was like a bunch of piranhas, you know. During the day, in the hot part of the day, nothing would feed. You wait till the evening, the sun went down, and it started shading over the pond, and you throw a cup of food out, and it was just piranhas, just madness. And it made me proud. I was happy. I enjoy it. It's something I do in the evenings, and it's just relaxing. Come out and feed my fish. You know, back to having my pond established for these frogs. They would let. They had. I guess when I put my fish in, it was in April, March or April. So it was prime time for the frogs breeding over here, and they had eggs strung out everywhere. And the little tadpoles. Let me show you some of those. See, these were the little tadpoles, and I'm not sure if that's toads or just the young bullfrogs, because I never really seen any of the bullfrog tadpoles at a small size. But I got some real big ones that's probably 6 inches long. That's real big bullfrog tadpoles. But these little black ones, throughout, I guess, the beginning of April, they will be 3 feet out from the bank. Just a solid black wall. That's how many they had in here. It was just taken over by frogs, by tadpoles. So everywhere you walk around the pond, I mean, the whole circumference of the pond, 3 feet out, was just solid black tadpoles. These little guys. And within 2 to 3 weeks, this is about what you get left. I mean, those fish, I've heard the fish didn't eat the little black ones, they just ate the bullfrog ones. But there's no way there was that many tadpoles, and I didn't see a million little frogs on the banks from them growing legs and getting out the pond. So I'm assuming the fish ate them. That's the only thing I can see. So people that say that they don't eat them, I don't know about it. I'm calling BS on that one. Because there was hundreds of thousands or millions within 2 to 3 weeks disappeared. And I mean, this is what I got left since the beginning of April. Just a few little patches of black spots from tadpoles. But these big old bullfrog tadpoles, they would never pile up as much as they had those little black ones. So I'm figuring that my bass are eating these big ones. So having those tadpoles, that was just a huge food source for my fish just starting out. You know, and they grew pretty rapidly. I tried looking for other videos where people were saying how much their fish grew in a year or in 6 months, and they had one guy, Dismore Outdoors, I believe, or something like that, and he started off pretty good doing it, and I hadn't seen a new video. I think he got up to a year or a year and 6 months on his bluegill and his bass when he'd go out, catch them, and measure them and give you an estimate of what they were. But I mean, it was fun watching them grow, and they spawn. I think by May they were spawning already. I mean, even those little 2 to 3 inch ones, when I first put them in beginning of April into March, by the end of April and May, you know, they were spawning several times. I see little beds in the dirt and bluegills fighting on the nest and stuff, and I enjoyed watching all of that, watching them grow, and then I see a whole bunch of little fry. And so then I knew my fish reproduced several times throughout the summer. So when the fall came, I decided it was time to put my bass in. I might get those F1 tiger bass. And I got 30 of them, and I didn't lose a single one that I know of. I only seen one turtle in my pond, and I've seen him last summer for a little while, and I might have seen him once or twice this year, but I hadn't seen him in the last month or so. So if I had lost any fish, I think I'd see them floating, or unless some coons or something got them. But I never noticed any of my bass dying. I never had any problems with the bass. And I got them from a different hatchery. It was what was it? Sportfish. Can't think of that name. American Sportfish, I believe. And they kind of led the way with these F1 hybrid bass and stuff. So It's supposed to be they gain the weight like the Florida bass strand, get real big like a Florida bass, but they're aggressive and easy to catch like the northern bass. I've heard stories of people stocking their ponds with Florida bass, and they know they're in there. Every now and then they'll catch one, but they just don't bite artificial baits. They say you'd have to fish with like a live bluegill or something to catch one. So I wanted to have a pond that's set up for fishing. We can have a lot of activity, catch a lot of fish. I like to have some big ones in here, but it's a half-acre pond. I don't know how big I can raise a bass to be in a half-acre pond. But I'd just be happy to have a few 3 or 4 pounders in here. Catch a bunch of 12 to 14-inch bass, and you never know when you can have a 4 or 5 pounder come up and explode on a top water bait, and that's all I'm worried about. And just having fun fishing. I enjoy it. Love my fishing. Like catching a bluegill right now. I've been using a fly rod catching bluegill on top water, and that's a blast. Something I never done before until I got a pond. Started to tie flies. I got my kids making their own baits, and just been playing around with it. So I was curious on how much my bluegill were growing, and so I started taking pictures on my phone and measuring them on a belly board. And within a year's growth on the copper-nosed bluegill, I've caught some right about 8 inches. Most of them are 7 inches in that area. I have all different sizes. They've been breeding pretty well. Good spawns. So I got feed for my fish. I was worried about my bass. When I bought my bass in the fall, I didn't measure them on the release when I was releasing them. I wish I would have, but I caught a few within a day or two later, and they were from 8 to 9 inches. So this spring I started catching a few. I said, well, let me start measuring them, see if they got any growth on them. They had big old pot bellies on them. They were fixing to spawn, and I measured anywhere from 9 inches to 11 3/4 for about 6 months of growth, I guess, since I stocked them in the fall till March, April. And it's weird because sometimes I'll still catch a small one, that's still right around 9 inches, and I don't know if he's just not growing, he's not feeding, or maybe that's a male and the females are the 10, 11 inch ones, or they just all have their own different personalities, and some feed more than others and grow faster than others. So I was kind of worried that I didn't have enough feed in my pond. After they spawned, all their bellies were shrunk up, and for a couple of weeks I couldn't catch nothing with any weight on them. They were looking skinny. I was like, I was really worried. But it was before the bluegill started spawning, and before the frogs really got to producing tadpoles everywhere. But it wasn't long. Maybe 3 weeks after the main spawn, they started putting their bellies back on, and I just started to weigh them. And I guess I had some 9.5 inch bass weighing 5 ounces, 5 or 6 ounces. And I really hadn't found any data on it to know if I'm doing good or not, but they look healthy to me. Nothing looks skinny or out of proportion, so I think they're doing fine. We just keep on fishing them and checking them. Some of those bigger ones, they're getting a little over 11 inches, and I hadn't got to weigh any of those yet. I just started weighing them, and so I need to catch me a few more of those bigger ones and see what they weigh in. And I take a picture on my phone, and then I edit my photo, and I'll type it in there, the date, the length, and the weight of them, just so I have a record to go back and look at. So now I'm starting to worry about culling. When do I need to start culling? I've read some things say let the bass go for another 3 years when you put them in there. Give them 3 years before you start taking fish out. I think putting 30 bass in was a lot of bass to put in at first. I guess it was okay if I would have lost some, but if they all survived, plus now they reproduced, which they'll feed on their young, so they should have plenty feed. But so I'm kind of watching the whole system and trying to figure out when do I need to start taking some out for some fish fries, you know. And I think I think by the end of the summer I'm gonna let my bluegill go through quite a few spawns, and I might start taking a few, not my largest bluegills out, but maybe my 6 to 7 inch, somewhere in there. Have 1 or 2 fish fries, you know, just to have some bounty out of the pond, just to take some out and see how it works and see how my pond reacts to it. I'm not gonna take any bass out this year. I tried to start marking them. I thought about tagging my bass, so I knew that was my first generation, my F1s, not to touch those, you know, and just start catching their spawn and using those to take out the pond to start as my culling with. So I'm gonna watch them, let them grow another year, and I started clipping their fin. I seen that. I guess it was Dismore or I can't remember the name of that guy's channel. Dismore Outdoors. He was taking a hole punch and clipping the bottom fin, and just so you'd have a little hole, a little mark in it where you can tell this, you know, this is my first batch of fish. And so I done that to a bunch of them that I caught all spring. And I've probably done almost all of them. I know I've done at least 30 of them. So y'all should be tagged. But I'll catch some every now and then, and I started looking at that fin and it's starting to grow back. It's growing over the little hole that I punched in. So that's not gonna work. So I don't have any way of marking them, but they'll be the bigger fish. And I guess the ones that don't get big enough and they start to decline off and their hatchlings their seedlings or whatever you want to call them, they start to catch up in growth and they'll be in that same size, that slot limit, and I mean they'll be fine to take out because they don't have the potential to grow big anyway, I guess. If I got some that's real big and some that hadn't grown from the first batch, I guess they're good cold fish. So next year I'll see where they're at with my as I keep catching them and measuring them all year. As long as they still looking fat and healthy, I know they're eating, I'll let them keep on reproducing and not worry about taking any out. See what sizes my bigger fish are, and then try and find me a little slot limit to, maybe a 10 to 12 inch fish. Maybe next summer I'll take out. I'll keep a few 10 to 12 inch fish, and I'll have some 14 inch fish, 15 inch maybe. I don't know how big they're gonna get by next year, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to having something that's a little bit bigger that can pull back on the rod a little bit, give me a little play. But it's still they're aggressive, man. I'll throw a little buzz bait in here and they'll come up and they'll explode thinking they're a 5-pounder, you know. They got an attitude to them, so it's fun catching them. I love it all, every bit of it. The pond was a great investment, even though I paid more than I should have to get it where it's at today. But that's just learning pains, I guess. And the whole family enjoys it. The kids swim in it all the time. We'll get a few geese to come in and wood ducks and mergansers. So when I started seeing a pair of wood ducks coming in throughout the winter, I said I'm gonna build me a wood duck box, and I had some paperwork from Wildlife and Fisheries on how to make a wood duck box, and I followed their instructions. And I guess about 2 weeks ago maybe, they had a pair come in, which they probably got a nest somewhere else at this time already. But they were curious with the wood duck box, and they would fly up and look in the hole and fly back down. And one time she landed on top of the box, and I mean they swam all around it, so they were checking it out. They know it's here now. They don't come every day. Usually they come before a storm or something, or during the rain. I'll get them, but I can't wait to have that part of the pond as well going on. You know, I got the frogs, I got minnows, I got the bluegills, the bass growing, deer feeding and drinking out of the pond. Now I got some wood ducks to look at. I enjoy it all. So now all I got to worry about is how I'm going to keep my pond in balance, what I'm going to cull out of it. And I need to build a deck. It'll give them some shade. I'm thinking about going from those pipes where the siphon system is, go from pipe to pipe with a deck. And I'll have the deck up over the pipes and kind of hide all of that. It'll be underneath the deck. But I got to do it in a way where I won't puncture my pond. I can't drive poles into the bottom because I don't want to puncture that crust that I made, that seal and everything. That's what I'm scared to do. Even my wood duck box, it's just I got the legs crossed on the bottom of that pole, and I got put some big blocks, concrete blocks on each pole that's holding it. It's just sitting down. It's nothing's in the mud. It's just sitting on the surface of the mud. So I gotta figure out a way to build a deck. I don't want to have a floating deck in case my pond starts fluctuating during a drought. I don't want it to drop too much and come back up and end up hitting the pipes or whatever. So I was thinking about just laying some beams, making like a big triangle and slide it down in there or something. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna figure something out. But that way it'll give the fish some shade. And I'm gonna cut a bunch of cedar trees, and I think I'm gonna stack them all up underneath. I don't want to have to worry about the kids getting hung up on baits, hooks, and structure and stuff. Most of my structures that I have in here is all like PVC pipes and irrigation tube and stuff that your baits can work their way out of easy. But this whole side of the pond is pretty much gonna be that swimming area. My structures are mostly on the other side, rocks and stuff, so I don't have to worry about the kids getting hung up. They know where they can swim at, what's the clean part. I'll have that deck where they can swim around the deck, but they can't go underneath the deck because that's where all my brush is going to be. But I think I need a place that the bass can't penetrate and get into, but all my minnows and small bluegill can have a refuge so those bass don't wipe them out. Because once those bass start to get big and all their fresh hatchlings get to a size where everything's feeding on the bluegill, I see them patrolling around the banks just non-stop around the pond, and I don't know how much pressure they could put on those bluegill, but I think once I got a bunch of hungry mouths that can eat a lot, those bluegill can need a refuge place just so I can maintain some bluegill for them, so they can keep on spawning and feeding the rest of the bass. So that's what I'm thinking. I got plenty of rock piles. The rock piles work out great. They plenty of little caves and stuff in it that the little fish can get in and hide. Even my wood duck box, I put that irrigation tubing all along the bottom of it. Anything that I put in the pond, I put irrigation tubing. But that's really just cover for the bass to kind of hide against, and he can still get through all of that irrigation tubing to get to a brim. It might give him a fighting chance to be able to run away, but it's not like having thick brush that the bass can't even penetrate into. So I need something. I think it would be great to have that underneath that dock. So that's my plans for it. And we're gonna be starting on that pretty soon. That's gonna be a summer project, is building that deck. I'm waiting for this COVID-19 pandemic to clear out so I can go to the hardware store and start buying my 4x4s and my decking and everything, and we'll get on it this summer, and I'll probably video a lot of it. I'm sure the kids will enjoy being in the water, holding the pipe level so I can, the post level, so I can anchor it off and brace it and everything. So I know they're ready to start swimming. We had to go swimming when we put that wood duck box in. I had it floating on top of my little flat bottom boat. It was about to flip the boat, so I had to get in the water and have my oldest son in the boat holding it. And we kind of let it rock in, and I was holding the boat from flipping over because I had 2 bags of cement worth of blocks on the end of each leg around it. I was worried about it was a lot of weight and it was off balance, so I was worried about flipping the boat, but it worked out good. But it was a cold day. So I guess that's about it on my fish, where I'm at with my fish right now. A little bit about stocking, a little bit about my aeration system, and the plans I got for the deck coming up. So we'll see y'all next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And my little kids were laughing at me on my other video. I said, hit the little bell alert button. Dad, it's a notification button. So I got fussed at for that. So hit the notification button so you can get alerts. And we'll see you next time.